Discussion of truth. Look. I want to. I'm going to talk about the book that I have just published here. High stakes treason. How John Brennan compromised American security for millions. And what you're going to find here. Let me over this Metallica. But me being from California, Metallica has decades of roots in Northern California through Cliff Burton, the original bassist, and that's why I believe it's through Cliff that they it was San Bruno that they relocated from LA to San Francisco, but they are not originally from San Francisco as a foundation. That being Lars and James. But I've been a personally big Metallica fan since the mid to late 80s, really, when I was about 12 years old. Okay, so anyway, like to have that in the background, and for many years I played Seek and Destroy as my intro to Discussion of Truth, which dates to 2016 in Miami on Winwood Radio. High Stakes Treason is published July of this year, 2025. By the way, happy holidays. 2 years ago at a CPAC in Maryland, D.C., I was approached by a former FBI agent that was trying to get his research out. And what I'm going to bring to you today, and this is going to be a 4-part installment, is actually a letter that he distributed to independent investigative researchers and independent kind of media sites. Now, what isn't astonishing is that nobody listened to him. And he began investigating John Brennan back in 2010, 2011. He stopped working with the FBI in 2000, but he had spent over a decade in the FBI, and he was somewhat decorated. And he was fired by the FBI, but he came across malfeasance of John Brennan working under the Obama administration, and he pressed forward. So the hero in all of this is my information source, that individual. And I disclose his name in the introduction of the book. The foreword is written by Roger Stone, and he is the hero in all of this, because regardless of administration, he continued researching and digging into alleged crimes of John Brennan, and the particular letter that I'm going to be reading to you that I've just recently come across, because she didn't know about me until I met him at CPAC in 2004 or 2024. The original letter was distributed in 2021, so 3 years before I had met this person. And naturally, the contents of his research was shunned. It was disregarded. It was jettisoned, right, by not only mainstream, but independent media sources, such as myself. Look, I have a BA from Oregon, but it's not in journalism, and I never intended on starting a podcast. In 2016, I was actually working to try to get myself into the film industry, which I'd done various small level films and higher level films, but in the background. When someone asked me to start the podcast because of the research that I'd done on the Zika virus, that's when the floodgates opened for me in regards to my input. Floodgates meaning me putting effort into the research. So I basically stopped everything I was doing, put together any gig I could put together to make ends meet for myself, but my main concentration being the research, because in 2016 I was exposed to a guy named Anthony Sutton, who was a Hoover researcher at Stanford, and he wrote about the corruption of the Federal Reserve. It's called the Federal Reserve Conspiracy. That book spoke to me. And so I've done everything I could to expose the fraud that we as the people, right, that represent the Constitution, or the Constitution represents us. That's the fraud that's been conducted on us. We're allowing it to happen. So it's up to you and me. It's up to us to hold, as Kash Patel put it, American gangsters or government gangsters accountable. Okay, so the real hero in all this is my intel source, and he's a former FBI agent. So I'm going to read to you a letter that really kind of gives, and it's going to be a 4-part, because it's a 25-page synopsis of this work. You can go right now to Amazon and purchase it. I'm going to leave a link in the description. Buy the book on Amazon if you haven't yet. I recommend it, because what this does is it gives you a eagle eyes view of how this scheme, this shadow government scheme, was beginning to unfold in DC to not only rig the government and manipulate your voice, but to implement a communist agenda. And that is a new world, that is a new world order, that is a globalist agenda. And if you ask me, I will tell you that it's rooted out of the United Nations. It's not American, okay? It doesn't represent your Bill of Rights. It doesn't represent your Constitution. It represents corporate forces working to literally actually tear down those rights. And it's systematic. It's not like this new plan. It's been around for decades before you were born, likely. And I would almost guarantee that, because I can go back to the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, and I venture to say there's a human being on this planet that was born prior to 1913, not in 2025. Maybe there is, but I haven't heard of one. Maybe somewhere in Japan. But the things to think about as I read this letter to you are: consider what Patrick Byrne has said lately, and I'm going to mention 3 things. And you can access an interview on YouTube that I interviewed Patrick, I guess it's probably about 3 years ago now, regarding voter fraud. Patrick Byrne has come out on Alex Jones and Emerald Roberts and Lindell TV, and he's mentioned 3 things that should be quite alarming to you. The first is that he was recruited asset by the CIA dating back to 2006. This is Cambridge educated, Stanford educated, CEO, co-founder of Overstock.com. That's Patrick Byrne. So that's the first thing to know, is that he was a CIA asset. That may not be new to you. It is to me. But in that regard, David S. Cohen is the person that seemingly had recruited him into the CIA, and Cohen was head of OFAC at the U.S. Treasury that would have approved the sale of the scheme that is alleged John Brennan got away with while he was at the U.S. Treasury. Furthermore, this David S. Cohen individual that brought Patrick Byrne into the CIA back in 2006 became Brennan's number 2 when Brennan became head of the CIA under Obama. Okay, very critical information I'm giving to you right now. So that's number 1. Number 2 would be that Patrick Byrne has stated to Alex Jones recently that he organized the Russian collusion with John Brennan. Let me repeat that. Patrick Byrne, former CEO of Overstock.com, has stated to Alex Jones within the past 10 days that he organized the Russian collusion, which is a hoax, with John Brennan, the subject matter of this book. That's number 2. Number 3, back in September, and something Patrick just reposted yesterday, I believe, is that John Brennan, according to Patrick Byrne, John Brennan was a business partner with the Serbian representative of Huawei, Huawei, the Chinese software firm that built the data center in Belgrade, Serbia, that controlled the Dominion servers that manipulated the U.S. election. Okay, so that's highly important. So those top 3 things that I've just told you were coming from Patrick Byrne, not from me, coming from Patrick Byrne, are very important to consider as I talk about the contents of this book as given through my intel source to independent media outlets in 2021. This is about 3 years before I met him. Now, I met him, and I took the information. It resonated with me. I vetted it. It crossed off from my research, edits, and it got published. And again, buy it on Amazon. Go there right now. High Stakes Treason. Order it. Get the audio version. Whatever. Just familiarize yourself with the information. Okay? So, I was able to take it to a level he never was. The intel source, right? He was never able to do that, but he spent over a decade, ladies and gentlemen, he spent over a decade trying to get his information on John Brennan out. It's now out. Okay. So there are 2 kind of faces to John Brennan that I can discuss, not knowing him, having asked him to give his comments regarding the contents of this book, and I haven't heard from him. The publisher hasn't heard from him. A reporter at the Daily Mail I've worked with, who wrote an article, but it wasn't published by the Daily Mail. It was rejected by their editor, by their legal department. They made an attempt to reach out to Brennan unsuccessfully. And the same goes for the New York Post. So right now, no mainstream outlet is talking about this either. Okay? But the 2 faces are A, financial fraud, which is presented through the book, and then B, the voting system fraud, which is the ball that Patrick Byrne seems to be running with right now. So investigate that. But those are the 2 faces going on here, and there's likely other elements to the scheme and rigging going on from John Brennan. It's not just him, I suspect. I would ask yourself what George Tenet was doing during the 9/11, and the CIA as a whole. But what we have here right now is, you need to be demanding that Pam Bondi take some action here. Your voice does matter. I'm an example of that. Okay, I'm just an average person, just like maybe you. Maybe you're not average. I'm an average person, and I'm just talking, and I'm just collecting information. Okay, and there's no reason you can't do the same. So I urge you to do that. Go to Congress. Go to the DOJ. Go to whoever you want to go to get your voice heard. And that is your right, right? That's your constitutional right. So let me read this. It's going to be 4 parts. And what am I, about 10, 15 minutes into this? And again, it's going to be 4 installments to this because it's 25 pages. And I'll do 2 installments today and probably 2 installments tomorrow or the next day. But look for all 4 installments. The letter begins as such. I'm writing to you regarding criminal activity by Mr. John O. Brennan, ex-director of the CIA. I am a former FBI SA special agent, 1988 to 2000, and worked FCI and espionage matters in the National Security Division of Washington Field Office. I first became aware of Brennan's criminal activity in July 2011, but I only realized the financial aspects of the crimes in 2019. Okay, so he's knowing of crimes being committed, but in 2019 he realizes there's financial crimes. Brennan made a fortune while allowing innocent Americans to be killed or maimed in terrorist attacks. Now, I've told you, this individual, as far as I'm concerned, is an American hero because, and you'll learn more, because as a former FBI agent, he was still looking out for the best interest of his country, and he realized there was something wrong going on in the John Brennan camp, and he continued to investigate, not being paid. By hiding his proprietary ownership of stock in an indispensable government contractor in his company 401k account, Brennan was able to garner an increase in value from approximately $50,000 to at least $4.8 million, while he was National Security Advisor for Counterterrorism NSA, CT, and Director of the CIA. However, Brennan lied about the value of his 401k account on 5 separate financial disclosure forms to cover up his conflicts of interest. Brennan's actions amount to treason against the United States. But the most easily proven violations are financial in nature. And again, I am reading you a letter from my intel source, okay, which is all of the research for the most part. Of course, I've gone through it and I've added some things, but this is the research of a former FBI agent of the United States of America. That's what you're getting when you're reading that book. I have evidence. Brennan filed 5 false official statements while National Security Advisor for CT, Counterterrorism, and Director of the CIA, Title 18, Section 1001. Caused 2 other false official statements to be made, one by an Office of Government Ethics official, and one by the White House Ethics Officer, Title 18, Section 1001, and committed 8 years of financial conflict of interest offenses. That's Title 18, Section 2008. As NSA CT to the President and Director of the CIA, it is reasonable to conclude that Brennan's official decisions would materially affect the value of the indispensable government contractor and the price of the shares Brennan owned in the company. There's clear evidence that even partially successful terror attacks caused Congress to increase funding to counterterrorism efforts, which was then passed to the indispensable government contractor and increased the value of Brennan's stock in his indispensable government contractor. I believe this blood money is why Brennan misused his government office to attack President Trump. And the other thing we discovered here, folks, is Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner was directly involved in this Russian collusion hoax against Donald Trump. He was working with the Obamas, and there's a 2017 interview of him interviewing James Clapper and John Brennan. That's Rob Reiner. In fact, in the state of California, his efforts to overturn the vote of the American people on that gay marriage law that I believe Kamala Harris was successful to overturn in the courts, but the people voted to define marriage between a man and woman in California. That got overturned in the courts. That's unconstitutional, folks. You know, they would use the word democracy all the time, and you know, left and right in their speeches and campaigns. They meaning the left. Yet you can overturn the vote of Californians? No, you can't. Not constitutionally, you can't. And Reiner was part of that. I don't know to what degree. I just know that he supported that being overturned. Okay, you know the old saying, follow the money. I did, and the evidence of the above violations is all taken from U.S. government sources. The purpose of this letter is to share my findings with you. I, too, am disgusted by the conduct of my former team, the FBI, but I can't prove the criminal acts I believe they, the FBI, committed. Brennan, on the other hand, is so stupid, he left a paper trail that was pretty easy to follow once you knew where to look. And that's something that is referred to, and I'm going to refer to as data mining. And another reason why he couldn't put his name to this material, and he needed somebody like me to put his name on the book. He couldn't because the FBI would confiscate it because they trained him how to find this kind of garbage. I reported these findings to the FBI, CIA, and the NSA, but the public does not know. Throwing around various charges of socialist, totalitarian, communist, etc. makes most people's eyes glaze over, but show the public this crook did it for money is something the public understands easily. The following information is self-explanatory, but if you need to ask about any of it, just contact me using the address information above. Sincerely, Mr., and I'm going to reveal the name here in the introduction of my book, John Donovan. And when I initially met my intel source, he was very standoffish. He's had a death threat. His family's ostracized him. And it's been a very hard road for this American hero to travel and to expose the malfeasance of John Brennan. And according to his research, John Brennan was sloppy, right? He left a paper trail, as I just read to you. And I'm going to try to get this letter to put out in the public, and maybe I'll use your news to write an article with it. And you can find other articles on the information about the book elsewhere. You can go to my website, iantrottier.com, you go to highstakestreason.com, you can find information on the book, clearly. But in regards to the layout and the presentation in this letter that was distributed and presented in 2021. That's going to be contained right here in this letter, and I'll try to write an article with it so you can find that. But again, this is going to be 4 installments. I am writing to inform you of a serious case of fraud against the government by both John Owen Brennan, JOB, former director of the CIA, and the Analysis Corporation and its successor companies. My allegations are based on my personal experience, public information, and government records. I've identified 4 additional individuals with direct access to unclassified, non-public information who can provide collaborating testimony. And keep in mind, the contents of this book, there's nothing classified. It's all open source, okay? That is a term used for, you can find it on the public record. Nothing in there is classified. And when he first came to me at my podcast table at CPAC 2024, I made very clear, it was one of the, if not the first question I asked him, it was certainly one of the top 3, likely the very first. I don't remember the sequence. Is any of the information, he presented me with a binder, put it on the table, asked me to go through it. I said, is any information in this classified? Because I don't have the authorization to be talking about classified information, right? No, I don't. And nothing in this book, nothing in that binder, nothing in the conversation that I had with him back in 2024 was classified. Nothing. Okay, it's all open source. And I've told you exactly why he couldn't put his name on it, because he himself had a conflict of interest with the FBI because of his training and his background and association with his former employer. But there's nothing classified here. It's just that he was able to data mine and extract and find, and knew where to look to show. And there's 106 pages of an appendix in this book, all documentation that show that the allegations are correct. It's not my research. I just authored it. Very important for you to understand that. I've identified 4 additional individuals with direct access to unclassified non-public information who can provide corroborating testimony. Fraud against the government by way of fraud in the inducement. John Owen Brennan, along with unnamed co-conspirators, uses offices as director of the CIA's Terrorist Threat Integration Center, the TTIC, and as director of the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, and as CEO and president of the Analysis Corporation, TAC, and as president's National Security Advisor for Counterterrorism, NSA/CT, and subsequently as director of the Central Intelligence Agency. So what we had under Barack Obama with a CIA director was a man, allegedly, committing very heinous crimes on his country. To establish a counterterrorism intelligence information monopoly, CT Intel Info monopoly, of all counterterrorism intelligence available to the United States government, Brennan and unknown co-conspirators used this monopoly to withhold such information from appropriate U.S. intelligence agencies so as to enable certain terror attacks to succeed. The successful terror attacks resulted in the death and serious injury of both the United States and allied national citizens. Brennan's purpose in enabling a select few terror attacks to succeed was to induce the U.S. government to spend increasing amounts of money to prevent similar attacks in the future. Brennan personally benefited from the increase in spending because the increased funding significantly increased the value of his personal financial holdings in violation of Federal Conflict of Interest Laws, 18 United States Code, Section 208. Brennan's activity also violated laws regarding the deprivation of civil rights, called official right, 18 U.S.C. Section 242, fraud against the government by way of inducement, 18 U.S.C. Section 1031, and treason by providing aid and cover to the enemy, 18 U.S.C. Section 2381. By means of this fraud in the inducement scheme, 18 U.S.C. Section 1031, Brennan and unnamed co-conspirators was able to convert this proprietary ownership of approximately 1,372 shares in common stock in the Analysis Corporation, TAC, valued at approximately $50,000 in 2009, into approximately 200,000 shares of successor company stock, NASDAQ, GTEC, symbol GTEC, GTEC, valued at $2.1 million in 2010. That's quite the profit. In April of 2011, the value of Brennan's stock holding in GTEC increased to 4.85 actually, following the acquisition of GTEC by Ares Management Company, who took the company private. That was domiciled, UK, in Hong Kong. CCP controlled. Brennan hid the windfall from public view by knowingly concealing it in his company 401k account and knowingly misrepresenting the monetary value of his 401k accounts on his financial disclosure forms of 8 consecutive years. Brennan's last false official statement to conceal this fraud scheme was in May of 2017, after the Steele dossier, after the Russian collusion hoax attempt. The background of the fraud. Brennan and others unnamed used the confusion of the reorganization of the U.S. intelligence community following the September 11, 2001 attacks, a la George Tenet, who was the director at that time, and John Brennan would have been his chief of staff, and their high-ranking positions in the government to establish a counterterrorism intelligence information monopoly, all counterterrorism intelligence available to the United States government, GT Intel Info Monopoly. The establishment of this GT Intel Info Monopoly was carried out in a deliberate manner to ensure a small group of individuals could front-run future terrorism incidents and thereby increase the share value of an indispensable government contractor, the Analysis Corporation, and its successor companies. Such a scheme would enrich the shareholders of TAC, the Analysis Corporation, but first, TAC needed to be converted into a publicly traded company to maximize the potential financial gains. And if you were alive during the 2011 attacks and you thought there might have been something up in a ride, knowing what happened and what was going on here with John Brennan is going to help you understand likely what went down that day. So if you have any suspicion in regards to Operation Northwoods, that could have been applied, and that was a 1970s operation to invade Cuba, I believe, is what Northwoods was created as. Was that a blueprint for what happened on 9/11 to our country? If you ask me, after 2016, starting this podcast, my answer is yes. If you'd asked me before 2016, me starting the podcast, I would have said no. Okay, but thanks again to the work of Anthony Sutton and his book, Federal Reserve Conspiracy, I'm telling you that you need to question what happened that day to your country. Was it an inside job? Sure sounds like it. The Analysis Corporation was a classified contractor for the CIA and Department of State since 1990. The Analysis Corporation designed and maintained the State Department's tip-off list, an early version of the terrorist watch list, using proprietary and copywritten software. Another proprietary software program was the Analysis Corporation's trademark computer program called Fuzzy Finder. Owning the proprietary software that made important national security programs of the United States government possible is akin to owning double-click patent copyright. Almost every website in the world uses double-click feature, and each website has to pay the holder of the double-click patent copyright a fee whenever a user double-clicks a link on a website. The Analysis Corporation has a similar legal authority in the intelligence community. Fuzzy Finder, quote, has been continuously operational within the government since 1990 and has been a very effective tool for finding the names of suspected or known terrorists in various databases, end quote. Fuzzy Finder was able to match various anglicized versions of names originally written in non-English alphabets, Arabic, i.e., with a particular individual, traveler, or visa holder, no matter which variant of the English spelling the individual used. The Analysis Corporation's intellectual property formed the foundation of any terrorist tracking effort by the United States government. Fuzzy Finder and TAC's other proprietary programs established TAC as the indispensable government contractor following the 9/11 attacks. Fuzzy Finder figured prominently in identifying this complex and long-running scheme to defraud the government. The U.S. intelligence community claimed falsely on numerous occasions, and its inability to decipher the names of two terrorists in various travel-related databases was a partial cause of these terrorists' success in terrorizing American citizens. The two terrorists were Umar Farouk Abdul-Muttalib, the Christmas Day underwear bombing, a flight left Amsterdam for Detroit, foiled, by the way, and Tamerlan Tsarnaev, the Boston Marathon bomber. Both terrorists succeeded in terrorizing the public, while John Brennan was the president's, that would be Obama, NSA CT advisor, National Security Counterterrorism advisor, or the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, as was the case during the Boston Marathon bombing. In either position, Brennan's official decisions could reasonably be believed to affect the value of the analysis corporation, the indispensable government contractor, for his personal financial benefit. Okay, so not only allegedly has Mr. John Brennan allowed terror activity to enter the United States, but he's done it. What is being said here is that he's done it so that he could enrich himself financially, meaning he has harmed American citizens so that he could financially benefit. If that's not treason, that's the first word that came out of my mouth when I met my intelligence source, the person who wrote this letter that I'm reading to. I don't know what is. I'm telling you right now, that's treason. Okay, President George W. Bush directed the FBI, CIA, Homeland Security, and the Department of Defense to establish the Terrorist Threat Integration Center, TTIC, to merge and analyze all terror threat information in a single location. During his January 28, 2003 State of the Union address. Subsequently, the Analysis Corporation was bought by and made wholly owned subsidiary of Sachs Freeman Associates Incorporated, a well-established government contracting company. On March 12, 2003, CIA Director George Tenet assigned his former Chief of Staff, John Owen Brennan, to become the first director of TTIC. That is the Terrorist Threat Integration Center, established under George W. Bush, 2003. On May 1st, 2003, the TTIC opened its doors. John Owen Brennan, director, TTIC, filled its ranks, and approximately 3 dozen detailees from across the United States government, USG, and was mandated to integrate CT capabilities and missions across the government. Brennan was enabled to establish his CT Intel info monopoly by executive order. Brennan himself stated, quote, "The idea behind TTIC was that we needed to have some place in the government where all counterterrorism information would reside. Eventually, information from all 26 classified and unclassified networks flowed into TTIC. Wanted voyeuristic capability, info, the activities, and records of the entire intelligence community. The good news and the bad news, TTIC had more access to more information than anywhere in the government," end quote. John Brennan. On August 27, 2004, President George W. Bush converted TTIC into the National Counterterrorism Center via executive order. The NCTC had 2 core missions: to serve as the primary organization in the U.S. government for analysis and integration of all terrorism intelligence, and 2, conduct strategic operational planning, SOP, for counterterrorism activities, integrating all elements of U.S. national power. Okay, so John Owen Brennan was a very powerful man, and according to Patrick Byrne, remains a very powerful man, if not more powerful than Donald Trump. Okay, because Donald Trump doesn't seem to be exercising the full powers of his office, because it would seem that he is somehow compromised. And if you ask me, it's because of Wilbur Ross and M.M. Rothschild, the bankruptcy banker that bailed him out in 1990 on his Taj Mahal project in Atlantic City. Yes, it gets very muddled very fast. Brennan continued as a director of the TTIC as it transitioned into the NCTC, and then Brennan was appointed interim director of NCTC on October 27, 2004. Under Brennan's leadership, the TTIC and then the NCTC had the responsibility to provide integrated assessments of the terrorist threat. For example, when there are principal committee meetings or deputies committee meetings, or the president needs to be briefed on something about the terrorist threat, TTIC and then the NCTC represents the view from throughout the community. That is the sort of unique responsibility that we have on behalf of those partner agencies, end quote. Brennan was able to establish the CT Intel info monopoly from the intake of the raw intelligence information on all the way to the Office of the President for the United States. Brennan stated, quote, "NCTC is the mission manager or terrorism for the entire intelligence community. As far as the collected requirement system is concerned, we play a lead role. We work with the other agencies and departments to determine the national intelligence priorities framework," end quote. In the above statement, Brennan clearly described how his new agency is the mission manager for the collection requirements for the entire intelligence community, i.e. NCTC directs what information agencies like the NSA collects for CT purposes. So the NCTC has a leg up, if you will, on the NSA. and we'll talk about Edward Snowden a little further into this letter. But let me remind you that this is going to be part of 4 installments, because there's 25 pages to this letter, and what I'm giving you is a synopsis of the information that you will find on this book available on Amazon that I've authored. The crux of all the information was given to me by a former FBI agent regarding the alleged crimes of Mr. John Owen Brennan, the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency. To describe the depth of penetration the NCTC's CT Intel info monopoly had into FBI and CIA internal records and information systems, Brennan provided the following observations. And you can go to highstakestreason.com if you want to kind of get a better understanding of what I'm talking about, because I break down some things. There's also an article there. Roger Stone has written a fabulous intro to this book, but I would do that if you want to kind of follow along, because I don't have this information published in an article as way it's construed here. Yeah, and I just came across this letter a couple days ago. Again, I known about the information. Obviously, I've published a book, but in the way that it's distributed and presented in this letter, which was published in 2021, I've just recently come across it, so I'm sharing that. To describe the depth of penetration the NCTC's CT Intel info monopoly had into FBI and CIA internal records and information systems, Brennan provided the following observations. We got another quote from John Brennan. Quote, the FBI has the responsibility for working with local law enforcement as far as getting information that is relevant to the terrorist threat. The FBI puts all that information into its databases and information systems, and the CT Intel info monopoly has unfettered access to those FBI systems. I'll repeat that, has unfettered access to all those FBI systems, end quote. Data does not have to be pushed to us by the FBI or other organizations. That's the great thing about the CT Intel info monopoly. We don't have to rely on CIA or FBI or others to package up information and send it to us. We have full real-time visibility into their information system databases. So anything that's committed to an electron in the FBI system or the CIA system, we have real-time access to it. So they're getting information, John Brennan, before the FBI or CIA may be getting it. Another quote. We, at the CT Intel Info Monopoly, have full and unfettered access to CIA Directorate of Operations Information Systems, DO cable traffic, and DO databases. DHS analysts in the CT Intel Info Monopoly have visibility into the CIA and FBI databases and information systems. And if our analysts see anything that is of relevance to the Department of Homeland Security that has not yet been formally disseminated, we have mechanisms in place that allow that analysis to go back to the CIA or FBI and say, you may not realize this, but this information is important. There's a balance of power there? No, because it's a monopoly. There's no balance of power. And that's why the allegation, this individual was able to get away with crimes while compromising American security. The significance of the above 2 paragraphs. NCTC personnel can pursue the contents of FBI and CIA databases and electronic communications at will in real time with no oversight, but have no obligation to reveal to either agency the NCTC personnel actually reviewed in either agency's files or what importance the NCTC personnel attached to the information they found. The NCTC can review initial information about a person in FBI and CIA file and communication systems without the direct oversight of either organization. NCTC can use this unprecedented access to spot a potential terrorist before either the FBI or CIA are even able to assign an agent or analyst to review the information. These circumstances existed in both the Umar Farouk Abdul-Muttalib and the Tsarnaev incidents. That'd be the Christmas Day underwear bombing, 2009 flight from Amsterdam to New York, and the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing by the Tsarnaev brothers. So again, to repeat, the NCTC, which John Brennan was the head of, was able to aggregate all information of terrorist threats before either CIA or FBI could acknowledge those threats themselves. And what we're saying in the book is that he was able to sequester that intel, which means hide it. So keep it away from honest country-loving intelligence agents. That's a very, 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 very bad thing. It's called treason, guys. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I understand it to be. This advance notice can then allow a bad actor in the NCTC to pick and choose, classify, and compartmentalize which additional intelligence collected by the NSA on the potential terrorist that the NCTC will be allowed to filter down to the FBI case agent. By filtering out just enough key information to hamstring the FBI Guardian investigation, the bad actor at the NCTC can set up the potential terrorist to succeed, and for the FBI to be seen by the public to fail. For example, the Boston Marathon bomber, Tamler Zarnaev, was first reported to the FBI as a potential terrorist threat by way of an initial message from a foreign intelligence service, the Russian FSB. The FSB informed the FBI they considered Tamler Zarnaev a terrorist threat based on Tamler Zarnaev's online activity, telephone conversations with his mother, and contact Zarnaev had with 2 additional suspected terrorists. The initial FSB communication became available to the NCTC at the same time it arrived in FBI communication channels at FBI headquarters, and before an investigative lead could be set in the FBI's Guardian system. Very critical. With this initial information, an NCTC analyst could search all 26 intelligence communities' databases, sift through social media posts, and conduct a separate assessment on Zarnaev before the investigative lead even assigned to an FBI agent. With this advanced knowledge, the NCTC could then front-run the FBI investigation by tasking the NSA to send Zarnaev-related information to the NCTC instead of the FBI, preventing the FBI from having a chance to look at the information. The OIG's unclassified report contains a reference to the FBI Legat, Moscow, stating his opinion that redacted agency abbreviation would have recordings of Zarnaev's international telephone conversations. Disregard the redacted agency abbreviation. Only one agency fits this description, the NSA, but the FBI Guardian investigation did not locate any such references, which is why the FBI Guardian investigation erroneously conducted Zarnaev was not a terror threat. The NCTC's Intelligence Tasking Authority allows it to modify intelligence collected priorities vis-a-vis a person of interest so that only NCTC receives any additional information on that target from raw intelligence collectors such as the NSA's PRISM and XKeyscore type programs. This is a perfect setup for a small group of individuals to front-run a future terror attack for financial gain using its awesome reach and power of the U.S. intelligence apparatus. This document will show the overwhelming evidence that the NCTC's extraordinary operating authority was used to enable select terrorists to succeed and organize efforts to cover up the NCTC's involvement, withholding key information from the appropriate U.S. intelligence agencies in order to allow certain terror attacks to succeed, resulting in the death and serious injury of citizens of both the United States and allied nations, is defined as, quote, providing aid and comfort to the enemy, end quote, treason. That's the United States U.S. Code, Section 2381. The intentional failure to prevent these terrorist attacks, despite having significant advance warnings and indications, induced the United States government to increase counterterrorism spending year after year. In just the case of the Analysis Corporation and its successor companies, the aggregate of the increased spending from TTIC's 2003 founding to the present day is estimated to be $2.2 billion. The increased counterterrorism spending resulted in increasing the value of Brennan's personal equity stake in the Analysis Corporation and its successor companies from approximately $50,000 in 2009 to over $4.85 million by 2011. And continued to hide his windfall of 2017. Again, that would be after previously in this segment that Patrick Byrne has said he organized with Brennan. So if you're not following Patrick Byrne, definitely follow what he's talking about, because he's talking about a lot. He's speaking a lot of great things, if you will. He's disclosing a lot of things to Emerald Robinson of Lindell TV and also Alex Jones. Brennan knowingly maintained his proprietary equity position in the Analysis Corporation and its sister companies in violation of conflict of interest laws. That's U.S. Code 18, Section 208, from January 20th, 2009 through January 20th, 2017. This 8-year period coincided with Brennan's tenure as the president of Barack Obama, or Barry Soetoro, NSA/CT's counterterrorism advisor, and the director of CIA. In both offices, Brennan made numerous decisions that would logically be expected to affect the value of his equity stock in the Analysis Corporation and its successor companies in clear violation of relevant conflict of interest laws. Brennan was informed of this conflict of interest February 2009 during his onboarding process as the president's NSA/CT. And by the way, John Brennan is an admitted communist, folks. He's an admitted communist going through his days as a student at the University of Texas, Austin. And I don't say that lightheartedly. He literally voted for the communist candidate for president 4 different times. And he's said that under lie detector tests before he became appointed the director of the CIA. So Obama put in place an admitted communist as the director of the CIA. I mean, how many of you knew that? I certainly didn't. How far gone is this country? It's very, very, very far gone, folks. But hey, if you like communism, you like communism. Is that your right? I think that's your right. I don't. It's never successfully operated any society, ever. And I'm telling you, it is a conquest tactic of the deep state. It is how they conquered what became known as the Soviet Union, Russia, and it's how they conquered the Chinese. Those governments are conquered. They didn't develop communism. Communism comes from what's called the League of Liberty or something like that. I think it's the Liberty League, which is essentially the courtier that advised Karl Marx. And by the way, Karl Marx sought refuge and received it in New York. First in London. Okay, so Brennan was informed of conflict of interest in February 2009 during his onboarding process with President's NSA/CT. In furtherance of the scheme to defraud, Brennan misled an Office of Government Ethics, that's OGE, official by stating he would dispose of the assets in his TAC 401k account, causing the OGE official to make a false official statement. Instead of converting the assets as promised, Brennan simply, and that would be Rachel Molinaro, he made that statement too. This is public information. Brennan simply changed the name of his account while the assets were held from, quote, TAC 401k to, quote, Sotero 401k. So he just changed the name, but he didn't convert into an IRA, which is what he was supposed to do. Or he said what you told Molinaro that he was going to do. Again, that's the Office of Government Ethics. To say, hey, there's no conflict of interest. Okay. The reason the name of Brennan's 401k account changed from TAC 401k to Sotero 401k was due to name, the ownership changes of TAC and its successor companies under contractual requirements written by Brennan himself. While Brennan was president and CEO of TAC from November 7, 2005 until joining the Obama administration in January 2009, he ensured the company's employee benefits program would pass through from one successor corporate entity to the next without any changes to the content of employees and ex-employee 401k accounts. Brennan's updating the name change on his financial disclosure forms indicates his knowledge of both the contents of the accounts, shares of common stock in TAC and or its successor companies, as well as a conflict of interest in continuing to own these assets while in a decision-making position affecting the value of the companies involved. Further evidence of Brennan's knowingly hiding his proprietary interest was revealed during his transition from the president's NSA/CT to the director of the CIA in January 2003 to March 2013 transition timeframe. It's breaking down here. Again, I'm reading a letter by my intel source that produced this book, okay? I've authored the book. I received information in the form of a binder that was published by Postal Press imprint named Bombardier Books. My name is Ian Trottier. Transition timeframe. The proximity of the meetings in the following timeline are significant. January 7th of 2013, John Brennan was nominated by POTUS to be the director of the CIA. January 14th, same year, Brennan, POTUS, and Saudi intelligence chief held a morning meeting in the Oval Office where Saudis informed POTUS and Brennan to beware of Tamerlan Tsarnaev. The 14th of January, the same year, following the Oval Office meeting, Brennan made an appointment to meet with Alexander Drew, President of Intelligence Operations for the announced successor company, Sotero Defense Solutions, and Andrea M. Solomon Drew, his wife, the Assistant Inspector General of the CIA. And keep in mind, my understanding is that David S. Cohen would have been, at this point, Brennan's number 2, but formerly working in the U.S. Treasury Department. And it was he that seemingly recruited Patrick Byrne into the CIA in 2016. That is the founder, co-founder, and former CEO of Overstock.com. January 16th, 2013. Brennan meets with Alexander Drew and his wife, Andrea M. Solomon Drew, in the West Wing. The 23rd of January. Brennan filed an ethics pledge. The purpose of this letter describes the steps I will take to avoid any actual or apparent conflict of interest in the event I am confirmed for the position of Director of Central Intelligence Agency, end quote, by John Brennan. And March 8th of 2013, Brennan financial disclosure form for Director of CIA lists Soterra Defense Solutions 401k valued between $100,000 and $100,001 and $250,000. That would be a false official statement. It was worth more, and he shouldn't have been owning the stock anyway. The preponderance of the evidence in just this 2-month period indicates Brennan knew the value of the Soterra holdings by meeting with the personal successor of the Analysis Corporation, which then became known as GTech, which then became known as Soterra, and that would be under Alexander Drew. And Brennan knew his legal responsibilities and intentionally subverted them. Brennan's history, vis a vis, TTIC, the NCTC, the Analysis Corporation, and then the White House and the Central Intelligence Agency. It is necessary to understand Brennan's employment history in this long-running scheme to defraud the United States government. Brennan established the TTIC using the Analysis Corporation as the foundational, indispensable government contractor. Brennan transitioned from director of TTIC to director of the NCTC while continuing to use the Analysis Corporation as the indispensable government contractor. Brennan retired as director, and that would be a monopoly. Okay, Brennan retired as director of the NCTC on November 2nd, 2005, and in a press release written 2 days prior, on October 31st, 2005, it was announced that John Brennan would become the next president and CEO of that indispensable government contractor, the Analysis Corporation. It's all in this book. It's all in the book. Buy it right now on Amazon. Okay. That's going to be the first installment. Going to let this upload. I'm going to come back and continue this letter with a second installment. And again, this is going to be a 4-installment effort. What I am delivering is a letter given to independent media sources by my intel source dating back to 2021. He came to me in 2024 at the DC CPAC in Maryland with a binder which I turned into a book. His name is mentioned in my introduction. The foreword to the book is written by Roger Stone. There's 2 other forewords in the book by former CIA analyst John Kiriakou and by a former speechwriter for Alan Keyes. Those are the 3 forewords in the book, Brooks Agnew. So, I'm going to continue the letter. I'm going to stop there for the time being for the first installment. Thanks for joining.